Hey guys, welcome back to another Doom of Fools podcast. We have the mono white guy Charles, known as the Tempo guy, and we have the GOAT Tyler from Play to Win. What's up, guys?
How's it going?
What's up? What's up? What's up? Today it is the week our president gets inaugurated, so I would love to talk about politics and CEDH, and I feel like it's a very hot topic. I,
The only kind of politics I have the stomach for right now.
100%. I don't know about you guys, but I can't stand real politics. So, and I was talking to my friend the other day, and he was like, I feel like we should just play a game that we're not talking. And I'm like, then play 1v1. Like, that's not even this. I couldn't imagine playing a game of Commander and not talk, right? And then we're going to talk about, I have a couple buddies, and my cousin just started playing Commander and talk about the difference of what Tyler said earlier, the difference of playing with your buddies and then playing in tournaments. It's a whole nother level. I feel like politics is an aspect of the game that you need. You need a certain amount of. Not the best politic player in the world, but you definitely need, this game is all about talking and, whatever. But let's get into it. Let's start. You guys can go back and forth, whatever you guys want to do. But let's talk about what is politics.
So I can kick off with kind of my vague definition off the cuff. I would say politics is generally when you're trying to get other players to take game actions by pointing out things or making observations or suggesting what the threat is or something like that to try and influence other players' play. So at its core, I think it's just trying to influence play when you don't actually have a game action to take.
Mm.
Interesting. Yeah, I would almost use that same definition, except I would cut out the part of when you have no game actions. I think it's just anything that you do that would influence other people's game actions is a form of politicking. In a multiplayer, but I would add the addendum. It would be like in a multiplayer setting where you either could cooperate or compete against multiple players. So in a 1v1, this definition wouldn't stand because you only have one opponent. But if you are playing against at least two other players, one of which who could be your opponent, and one of which who could also be like a non-opponent for a temporary time, then any action that you take, either through game actions or verbally, that would influence those players' decision making, would be a form of politicking for me.
Okay.
Yeah, seems also valid. I think this runs into also like, there's a point at which it becomes a deal, which is why to me, like, if I'm specifically taking a game action and I'm telling you I'm gonna do this if you do that, like that can either be a deal or sometimes it can be a threat. If you say if you do this I'm gonna counter it, but I really don't want to counter it. Some people would call that politicking, but I mean that's kind of a threat. But maybe these are just special cases of politicking, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah. I think that there are multiple different forms of politicking.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people have this conception that politicking is mostly verbal, like kind of like what you gave it as an example, Tyler, with making a deal with someone. But for example, if I play a card called like Council's Judgment, which was from Conspiracy, where everyone has to make a vote, right? I cannot say anything, and no one has to say anything, right? And we can let the spell resolve, and we immediately cast our votes. Like we write down the permanent that we want to vote, and we all flip it up at the same time. The thing is that I have think about it this way. Mechanically, that is a removal spell. So for those who don't know what Council's Judgment is, because they probably don't ever see this card in Commander,
I'll put it up here.
it's yeah. Yeah, I mean, it gets played in Legacy because it's one of those kinds of cards that people play in Legacy that they're like, oh crap, I'm stupid and I don't know how this card works. Because essentially, the way that the card works is that each player makes a vote on a card that you do not control, right? So they can't vote for any of your own cards. And then whatever card gets the most votes or is tied for the most votes gets exiled when this card resolves, right? And so in 1v1, this is a bit of a trap because you play this card and your opponent doesn't understand how this card works, and they vote for something that isn't the thing that you voted for. Both of those things will get removed because they're tied.
Right. So you don't say anything, you just write it down and then you reveal it at the same time.
Yeah, well, the way that the card is supposed to work is that you start voting first, and so everybody gets to know your vote first. The person that they don't know the vote is the last
In
person
priority.
who gets to vote,
Yeah.
right? And so it's kind of like the advantage of the last player. But here's the thing: in a political situation, right? If you have four players, A, B, C, D, right, and then we have like some number of permanents, right? I choose permanent one, B chooses permanent two, and then C chooses permanent one, right? D then gets to decide whether or not one leaves the battlefield or both one and two leave the battlefield. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if I vote for like rule of law and the next player votes for ristic study, right, and then the next player after them votes for rule of law, then the last player gets to decide. Well, if I can make the draw and both of these leave, right, or I can just vote only for rule of law and only rule of law leaves.
That's weird because
But
normally, something will resolve all at the same time, like a wheel of misfortune or something like that.
well, it is resolving technically at the same time, but voting is not happening
So, like
simultaneously.
Tivit.
This is actually the same thing as Tivit. Technically, the way that Tivit would work is that you each vote for something, and then the last player makes the final decision
Okay.
to vote.
Yeah, so it goes in priority. I'll vote, you vote, he votes, and then it resolves, and then he makes the thing. Yeah, because I played a lot of Tivit, and that's the thing is we could just, hey man, treasure clue, treasure clue, treasure clue. But the thing with Tivit is if you're going against Tivit, hey, let's talk about it. Hey guys, how many cards in his hand? How much mana does he have? Because at first it's normally clues, but like the third or fourth hit, you have to really talk about it. Hey man, he has 20 mana and no cards in hand, right?
Yeah, but to highlight how like we're not even talking about it. Think about this. The last player has a choice of either removing Ristic Study or both of removing Rule of Law, or they remove both Ristic Study and Rule of Law. But that was not actually really D's choice. That was a choice that C gave to D because C voted for Rule of Law. And so, because D, prior to C voting, D could have voted for another permanent, and we could have potentially had all three permanents leave the battlefield. Do you see what I'm saying? By choosing to vote for Rule of Law, C has forced D the choice of you don't get to vote for anything else.
Okay.
You either get to vote for Rule of Law to leave the battlefield, or you choose both Rule of Law and Ristic Study.
Yeah. I was put in a
So-
similar position like that, but CDH. So Tevish was on 10, right? I don't know if you guys know what Tevish is, but name
Yeah.
of the podcast. He was on 10, right? So Magna passed, and he was on 10, and I was in a creature deck, and the other guy, I think he was a blue farm, my brother. I had an opportunity to either tap I think it was a mana dork, tap for mana, right? Or no, I had Temna out. So either draw cards if I swing at the opponent, not the planeswalker, draw cards or swing at the opponent. But the guy after me in turn order before Tevish untaps with 10, he had creatures too. So instead of talking about it, what I did wrong was I was greedy, so I drew all the cards that I could, and then he was like, "Hey man, you're not gonna hit that Tevish." I was like, "No, I don't want you to priority bully me because then you can do whatever you want to do, and then I don't. So I'm gonna I don't know if it's priority bullying, but I'm gonna draw the maximum amount of cards, and I'm gonna make you deal with the Tevish because he has to swing at the Tevish, right? What he doesn't swing at the Tevish, and he draws cards with his Timna and taps his mana dorks, and then Tevish takes all the commanders. But that player didn't care about the commanders at that point. He kind of 3-for-1 me because I cared and Magda cared, but he didn't care. So I put him in an awkward position, and then he was just like, "Hey, sorry guys, I'd rather draw cards." He takes our commanders, right? So I feel like all that could have been avoided by talking. Instead of just, nope, I'm going to draw, you deal with it. And then now he's just like, no, fuck you, I don't care about it.
Well, so my point is that like even when you're not talking, you are making political moves. Cards are political in and of themselves.
Right.
If I play a card like Browbeat and I'm saying I'm going to draw 3 cards unless someone takes the 5, right?
I don't know what card
and
that
we
is.
go. It's a red card. It's 3 mana. Draw 3 cards unless a player takes 5 damage.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But the whole idea is that like whatever decision that you make or whatever card that you play involves a player to make a decision that affects their resources. Like in the same like I think that some people like for example who's going to counter this spell? and you priority bully the last player to counter the spell. Is that no different than me playing a card like Council's Judgment or Browbeat and then forcing the last player to make a choice that literally, is something that's out of their
I
control?
was going to talk to
Uh,
Tyler
I
about that. Yeah, good.
Yeah, I think that there are plenty of like widely overlapping definitions of politics. Some of that falls outside of what I think of as politics because to me, if you're just forcing decisions or pushing your opponents into optimal play lines by your decisions without talking about it at all, sometimes that's just how card mechanics work. So to me, I don't think that always falls under that distinction for me, but that's just it differs from person to person. Um, but I do think it's definitely true that when you're pushing your opponents towards decisions verbally, that that makes a lot of sense to me. If you're pushing it with like specific threats, um, trying to elicit certain outcomes or get your opponents to make particular decisions, that is definitely the same. But kind of where you draw the line in terms of what is just making decisions that cause their optimal play pattern to be what you want, that sort of
Yeah.
becomes a little blurry with just being normal Magic
Right,
strategy.
and that's why I'm glad I
yeah,
have both of you on because Charles he kind of plays he could play everything. He's a seasoned mono white player, right? With Tyler, he's famous for Kennen, and Kennen is a 2 mana commander that's easy to recast with a lot of mana. But in some times, if they remove the Kennen in the wrong spot, Tyler has to be like, "Hey, just because you had the interaction, you don't need to remove my Kennen. I'm showing you what I'm doing, and then you're trying to protect your guy, which you're not politicking too much, and we can go into the what are the forms of politics. Is like, hey, if you don't remove my commander, I can show you I'm doing this, or I'm just activating Kenny, or that guy's this, right? So that gets into the whole thing of, oh well, you're Tyler with Kennen though. Kennen's the best deck in the format, and then you're like, well, that's an opinion. Like I'm not winning next turn. Don't kill my commander. But with Charles, he's more stacks, hold down. Hey, if you remove my commander, I have all these things coming at you. I have all these different stacks pieces. You rather remove the stacks piece than my commander, right? So I agree. There's definitely different. There's different forms going into that. So Tyler, what do you think about having a commander centric deck? Like how do you like go to a game because you are famously good at politics? How do you go into that when you have win in hand, but you don't want to say you have win in hand, but you need your commander to win, but you don't want to tell people that, right? So when they start to, how do you kind of go through that?
Well, I mean, to answer that most directly, I would say I am usually extremely forthcoming about what is in my hand,
Right.
and I will talk about it a lot, in part because Kinnan as a deck allows you to do that. So if I do have win in hand, I will just not say anything about what's in my hand. But otherwise, I will, share as much information about my hand as I reasonably can, and I will very often reveal my hand because for Kinnan, a lot of the game plan does not exist in your hand. The way that other decks
Right.
use hidden
So you're trying to stay
information.
under the radar.
So in terms of politicking, that's the strength of the deck is that you really can, reveal your hand often and say, look, sure, I could hit something great off of a flip, but like from what's in my hand, you can see it right here. It's not that great. It's not that threatening. Are my other opponents willing to show you their hands? Because if they're not, then maybe you need to be worried about their hidden information.
yep. I mean, that was the same thing when I was playing Owl the Dawn Sky. I think in like the previous video I was telling you about this, Josh, about the decks like Winota and Owl and Kinnan. A lot of them play off the top of your deck, and they don't really care about this idea of card advantage, of cards in your hand or cards on your battlefield, because at any given moment, the whole landscape changes
Yeah.
based off
Yeah.
of what they flip
Yeah.
over, and the person who gets to control that is the person who owns that deck. Like the Winota player gets to look at their six and they get to decide, well, what do I want to put on the battlefield, and change that. Kinnan also does the same thing. Owl does the same thing. And what's interesting is that like that happens on resolution, and there's a lot of agency in the player, and it takes away agency from the other players. They can't really interact with that
Right.
once the
Right.
spell resolves, or once the ability resolves, I should say. Yeah.
I think we're all really familiar with the inverse of this too, which to me is instead of pointing out the hidden information, where like I just described, if I'm saying, "Hey, I'll show you my hand," you should be worried about your opponents who won't do that. The inverse of this is much more common because it's much easier. It's, "Hey, look at their board. Look at how much they have going on board. You should be worried about that." And that's when you're politicking based only on known information. And these are kind of two sides of the same coin in a sense.
Yeah, but
Yeah, there's
good.
go ahead.
I'm a proponent of. I don't know. It just rubs me the wrong way. Is I don't want to show my hand. Like, even if I don't have anything going on, unless we're in the finals of the Boil and we're about to lose, like, that just doesn't feel good to me. And I know people like my brother. He's like, I don't care if he's going to win or not. I'm not showing my hand. I have standards that I hold myself to. I just don't like that part of the game. And people are like that. Like, why do I have to politic? Why do I have to say something if obviously you're doing the wrong play? So now I have to, like, a lot of people are like, just play the spells. Just put spells in the stack. And I understand both sides where you need the politics. You need to be like, hey, I'm not winning. I just don't like giving people, yeah, I have 10 cards in heuristic study and I'm probably winning next turn, but he's like showing me a hand, or I'm just going to let that guy win, because it doesn't matter if he wins or you win, I still lose, so we're going to draw. And that's opens up a whole new can of worms. I don't want to show you my hand. I'll show you a card or two, but I just don't want to, because then it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're playing telepathy now, and I kind of hate that in a 3-4 color pile. But like, if you're in a low color like mono white, look at my hand all you want. I don't care. I'm looking at the top 7 cards of my deck.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing about having hidden information. Like, of course you don't want to share it, but I think it's perfectly valid for people to pressure you to and point out if you won't.
Well,
Yeah,
I think like that.
I agree.
That's based. So I think that's based off of a lot of like Wizards card design. So going back a little bit about like politicking and the different forms of politicking. The reason why I have this definition or idea of politicking, I think, is in my perspective, is partially influenced by game design and how games are built. And if you listen to these interviews with like Gavin Verhey, Melissa DeTora, the people who are like in charge of Commander now, and also with the cards that they print out with Commander, they are really, really leaning in to cards that encourage politicking.
Right. And a lot of taxes
like,
too, if you noticed.
Dockside Extortionist is a political card. When it was created, it was built with that idea of leveraging whatever game actions your opponents took. Namely, did they play a bunch of artifacts and enchantments? Can you take advantage of that? That was way too generalist for them, and they were like, okay, well, this was
a mistake
because we
Dockside should have never saw the light of day.
but the point is that this is the philosophy of that design is still present even to this day with like all the Commander products they print out. In fact, in last year around this time, they came out with the Commander Precon that literally had Prisoner's Dilemma, and they printed Prisoner's Dilemma as a Magic card, and that involved you voting, cards, voting something against your opponent, choosing an option, and then potentially screwing over the person that you choose.
Yeah.
And again, it is you. I find this kind of weird when players are like, yeah, I don't like politic in Commander or like in CDH, but the problem is like you can't really escape from it in multiplayer Magic.
Right.
Even if you choose not to talk to anyone and refuse to do anything and just play to your own personal gains or benefits, right? You are still forced to make choices in the game that will affect other players. And other players will react to it, and other players will also force choices upon you that you may not want to be in the position to be making. And like, try as hard as you might, you will end up in a game where even if all players agree not to like broker deals, you're going to end up in that kind of situation, especially when they print powerful Commander cards, right? Like, think about like situations back when Dockside was legal. Like, hey, don't play, this artifact, right? I have like this like null rod in play or whatever, and there's no use to doing it. And if someone plays a Dockside and then bounces my null rod, we're screwed, kind of thing, right? Don't feed the Ristic Study player. It's like, well, I gotta, because you had a really strong start. Your game actions forced my game actions to happen.
Yeah, it's just hard to do that and have, especially now in today's economy, for people to not be not selfish, but like it's hard to say that if it's not known information. Like, hey man, don't play all those mana rocks. That guy's in red. He could play a dockside. It's like, yeah, but if the sky was blue, I'd be orange, right? But if it's like, hey, he has a known dockside in his hand, dockside count is 7. If we cannot make it 10 to win, it's totally different if you don't see the card. Especially early games, a lot of people don't care to feed the Ristic Study, and then he wins a turn later, and we're like, told you, yeah, but he didn't see that, right? He didn't know he had an Adnals in his hand or Honorable Breach. So it's really hard to tell people not to play the game or not do this, not do that, if it's not, known information.
So, I'm not gonna. I feel like this is a whole nother topic here,
Yeah.
but I think what you're touching on. I mean, like for anyone watching this, they should probably just Google search decision tree, and find the Wikipedia article entry about this, because what the way that what you're describing is natural human behavior, or what we consider actually, as much as like egotistic or narcissistic it sounds, it's considered rational behavior to look after your own self-interest, especially in a competitive game where prize is on the line,
Right.
And like I literally just typed up decision tree on the Wikipedia page, and there's a really nice decision tree using flowchart symbols. Like that's literally what the section is called. And this is a great way of illustrating to people about what Tyler was talking about known information versus hidden information. When you are making decision, the thing about with like competitive Magic, once you commit to casting a spell or activating an ability, you can't really, most cases you can't really take that back. It's on the stack, right? Decision has been committed. You've either damned yourself in the whole table, or you put yourself in a good spot. But you won't know until you see what other people reveal afterwards.
Right.
And so there's a little bit of a probability calculus, right? If anyone plays or watches any game shows, right, like hidden doors, like door number 1, door number 2, door number 3, right? And one of those doors contains a prize. The other 2 doors contain a goat, right? The Monty Hall problem. And, people make their own probability estimates based on that. And not everyone is a statistician. Not everyone is like a mathematician. So it's not like, they're really good at making these decisions.
Yeah.
But they still have that intuition. And what's funny is like, I think that most people still operate under that heuristic of I'm always going to make the decision that gives me like the best outcome based on what I can see. And usually, like, and this is the other thing about decision trees, there are multiple levels in a decision tree, right? And most players, there's something in computer science called Dijkstra's algorithm, and that's another term that people should actually look up because they'll also see this. I would say, from my experience, how like 80% of Commander players operate, and what's funny is like Dijkstra's algorithm shows how stupid that decision making is. But it's basically you choose the most optimal immediate decision that gives you the best reward, but you don't think one turn ahead. You don't think one extra turn ahead,
Right.
and you don't realize, oh, that decision is actually not a good decision. Even if it gives me the best reward immediately, it has a worse payoff after the next turn, right?
And that's what that's what I want to get into next is I don't think it's that as in player skill or just the amount of time. Like, say I've played 1,000 games, y'all have played 1,000 games, but that fourth player has played 20 games, right? So I want to talk about politics compared to bullying in politics, especially if someone's just trying to mind trick somebody because they don't know how it works. They don't know what you know. They don't know how that deck wins. They don't know that his commander is a 1-card win con with that guy. So Tyler, can we talk about maybe newer players in the pod that don't know is, hey, that guy's politic his ass off, and the other guy's just like, yeah, I'll do whatever you want. I'll remove this thing, and he's just using you as a mind puppet. So what's kind of the difference of good politics and bullying or priority bullying or what Charles was saying, decision making?
Sure. Yeah, I think priority bullying is a separate thing, so let's kind of leave that for last.
Yeah.
In terms of bullying, I think there's kind of two kinds. One that you're pointing out is a lot of times I think newer players are going to be more inclined to take the suggestions of the players around them, and if those players want to like kind of prey on that and really lean into the politics of it and kind of try and influence their decisions, they're a lot more likely to listen to those players. Now, that's not always a bad thing. I mean, I think when you're doing politics well, you really are kind of giving the table the best advice to argue against, the current or most imminent appearing threat, or make the best decision in the scenario, unless it is against you, kind of. So, like, basically, the person you're talking to has three opponents. So 2/3 of the time, you are giving them the best information that you can, genuinely saying, "Hey, here's how I think you beat this," or the best
Yeah.
interaction point, or whatever it may be. But it is to a certain extent preying on inexperience to really lean on that with a player who is looking for advice, and what you're giving them is incomplete advice, or advice that's only to your advantage. But I think true bullying to me is a little different, and to me that's when you know someone is trying to influence someone else by verbally trying to persuade them to counter something, for example, or to take some sort of game action or make some kind of decision. And even after that player has said, "I don't think I want to do this because," you continue to argue over them and continue to try and convince them,
Right.
and basically don't take no for an
Yeah.
answer. And that's the
Yeah.
kind of thing where I think, especially in tournaments, that judges should get called a lot more
Yeah,
often
there's
for
no
this
game
than they
actions
do.
being taken. We're just arguing who's the threat or what you should remove or what you could counter, and it's been 10 minutes. We haven't done anything
Yeah,
to
and some
talk.
players will argue forever.
Yeah, and
And
so what's
in
hey man, time out, right? Like we need to make game actions here, and you're arguing that he's a threat or I'm the threat. It's kind of going nowhere, right?
Yeah, I personally do not really like that either.
Yeah.
First of all, I think like sometimes people really harp on making this decision, and from my perspective, it's like, dude, is this really the hill that you want to die on? There will be multiple other points of interaction we will have a conversation about,
Yeah.
and you're going to focus 10 minutes on this one like interaction when it's not even the most important
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
or
It's
like
like
it
little
doesn't even
stuff.
have to be,
Yeah.
or it's like it doesn't even have to be the most important thing.
Yeah. Like a risky study
if you
draw or hitting the Adnos player for another 2 damage. It's like if he's fighting about 2 damage, he obviously had Adnos in his hand and he's blue in the face.
Well, it's not even that. In some cases, it's like, hey, there's an
There he
Adnos on the
is.
stack, and if someone, yeah,
sorry,
or like
light went out.
there's an Adnos on the stack, and if you decide, hey, I'm not going to interact with this, is like, wait, no, 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 we do need to interact with this, and then they're like, no, I don't want to interact with it, or something like that, or like a Thoracle console on the stack, or something like that, and someone's just passing priority on like demonic consultation, and they're trying to argue with you or something like that. You know, I just think like if their decision is final, like for me, like there's multiple points of interaction with Oracle consultation on the stack. Like you want to like do something with the ETB trigger on the stack. You want to do something with the Thoracle spell on the stack, right? I once had someone like I was playing like Talion at an event, and someone is like arguing with me, like, hey, you should counter Thoracle, and it's like, no, I'm just going to pass priority. Like the spell's on the stack, and I'm just like, I don't care, right? It's like I just counter like demonic consultation, but I'm not going to tell them that, right? But they keep like pressuring me, like, oh, you should do something here, and it's like, no, I'm not, and I just it's like my decision is final.
Yeah, pass priority.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, pass priority, and the thing is like, by the time and the person, what was so crazy about it was that the person was ready to scoop and concede and pick up their cards, and like I was like, okay, and but like I don't know, I probably, if I was like, I don't know, I personally, for me, I feel like a dick if I like let them scoop, because and that might be like the mono white player in me, because like I refuse to have my opponents scoop off of like what I consider idiotic decisions, because I had a mental misstep in my hand for the demonic consultation, but like I wasn't going to like reveal that information until they played
Right.
it.
Yeah, you weren't gonna.
And
No, I agree.
yeah. But like I'm watching a player scoop, and it's like, well, my odds increase with you scooping, but at the same time, I feel like you're making a really dumb choice here. Like you're scooping before the Thoracle
That's when you
resolves.
just, hey man, I really think you shouldn't scoop. Let's play this out and see where it goes. But now the other red flag.
But the problem is, as soon as you say that, then they might choose not to play the consult now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I
right.
agree.
Yeah. And that's like the whole hidden versus public
I
information.
want to touch in on that, what we were talking about a minute ago. Let's spend like 3 minutes on priority bullying. I think that is such a nasty habit that players have, and sometimes they don't even know they do it. It's like me, you, and then him. He knows he has interaction, but he doesn't want to use it, right? So he asks you guys, hey, do you guys have interaction for this? And then now Tyler's like, well, I have one piece of interaction, but like now I know you have interaction, so I might pass. And I feel like there's got to be another way us as CDH players we could do that without making someone feel bad. Like, I guess I'm next in priority, I'll use all my interaction, and now the last guy in priority is like, sweet, I'm gonna untap and win with the protected win because they priority bullied. It's like I feel like we could probably talk about it more. What do you guys think? What do you think, Tyler?
I think there's a lot of ways to navigate that, and also it's worth making a distinction here that priority bullying usually means one very specific thing, and what you're describing is kind of like sandbagging interaction, or trying to
Yeah.
get other people to
Well,
cast something even if you have
there's a
something,
fine
which
line.
is not.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Mhm.
okay, but then
Priority
it's yeah.
priority bullying is usually if you're let's say you're up first in priority and you do have interaction, but you're hoping your opponents are going to spend interaction
And
first.
then you
If you
pass.
pass
Yeah.
and then the player after you passes, and then the last player says, well, I don't have anything, and then you say to that player, listen, if you tap a land or if you tap a mana rock, that resets priority order, and then I will be able to cast something. So now I need you to tap a land. That's priority bullying, where you're
Mm-hmm.
using this mechanic in the rules where even after a mana ability is activated, even though you can't respond to the activation of a mana
Priority order.
ability, priority order is reset to try and get your opponents to interact with something first, and only then do you say, okay,
Well, what if
I'm
there's
now I am going to
non-information?
cast something.
Yeah, so say that same
The
person in second, he knows in third has a mind break trap, but he has interaction, but he's first in priority. So does he just pass priority? So now that guy has to use a mind break trap or you lose, and that guy knows that, right? And that's just kind of the awkward.
Yeah, that's how priority works. It stinks for the player who's in third, but I mean the nature of turn order is that's kind of going to happen to everyone at one point.
Mm-hmm,
You're
mm-hmm.
never second in priority for the entire game.
Right,
I think
right, right, right.
I think the way that I've gone around it as a blue player is oftentimes like, especially, well, first of all, I think mono blue just kind of sucks because you don't really have a lot of good options other than having to interact on the stack. And this goes into the idea of like, well, I'll just let it resolve, right? Like, you wanted me to interact with it on the stack. I'm just not going to interact with it on the stack
Mm-hmm,
because I have a card in my hand that I'll just use later, right? And it
mm-hmm,
reaffirms, your position about not being someone's resource to leverage,
mm-hmm.
right? And also reaffirms your own responsibility on the table. This is a multi like tier kind of thing because it deals with like what kind of deck you're playing,
Yeah,
and
I
sort of
was gonna talk
like
about that next. Yep.
yeah, what kind of deck that you're playing in regards to the table. Like, I think that similar to like Tyler talking about like Kinnan, or like me playing like mono white stacks or something like that, right? Each deck kind of operates differently,
Mm-hmm,
and the agency that someone has at negotiating to something on the table, like, blue, just blue itself doesn't really have a really great way of dealing with permanents on a battlefield other than like Chain of Vapors, Cyclonic Rift, bouncy something. But then like, if they have if they have an effect like Mother of Runes or like Sylvan Safekeeper,
mm-hmm,
that just gets really 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 hard and really sticky.
mm,
But then like, if someone's playing like, black and they have access to Toxic Deluge, they can fix that problem for you,
mm-hmm.
right? If I am a blue black player, I will have access to both of those cards. And now I get like a choice. I can be like, yeah, that Sylvan Safekeeper resolves. I don't have a problem with it, right? Right,
Because you can
and
handle it on the stack.
I can handle it later, right? Whereas someone who's like, blue red, let's say, or sorry, not blue red, because they might have like Pyroclasm or something like that. But if they're just mono blue, right?
Mm-hmm,
That's a harder like thing for them to pass up on,
mm-hmm,
right? They're more susceptible to certain types of politicking,
mm-hmm.
as well. If I'm playing blue black, right, I don't want people to know that I have like Adnos in hand per se, or that I have a ritual in my hand that will allow me to cast Adnos when I'm not presenting 5 mana.
Mm.
Like, I don't want people to know that information. Whereas if I'm playing mono white, like you said earlier, Josh, go ahead, look at my hand, right? Like, what's there to
I don't
see?
care. Yeah.
Exactly, and so those types of things do matter in that kind of situation about like what colors you're playing, what type of deck you're playing, and things like that. But what I want to, so I'm kind of going like a little zigzaggy here,
You're
but
good.
what I also want to like mention for people alongside decision tree if you're at your computer, you should also look up a term called alpha beta pruning. It is a term used also in computer science for artificial intelligence. If you ever play like a game where you're competing against like an AI or something like that, and it's like chess. Actually, chess is a really good example. If you're playing against chess, there's only like a finite number of possible moves that the computer can make,
Right.
and the computer also knows there's only a finite possible number of moves that you can make as well. And so what it does is that based on any given move that it can make, it will then look at the next sequence of moves that you will make. And then it determines whether or not any of those moves that you are going to make is going to make the outcome worse for themselves, right? And if it finds, and so in each of those moves, they then cluster up like a tally of points, and then they figure, like, hey, this move is a bad move because right after I take this move, any move that my opponent makes is going to be suboptimal for me, right? And so I should choose this move because now there's more opportunities for my opponent to not make the best choices against me because all the choices that they can possibly make, even the best choice for them is not going to make the outcome worse for me.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because Tyler mentioned about like beginner players and how people can offer advice to them. I have a policy about this where I do offer the best advice to my players because I'm not because I hate to say this, but like many turns ago, I had made the move to ensure that whatever move you're going to make now, if it's the best move, it's not going to be the worst outcome for me.
Right. Right. But a lot of
And
newer
so-
players don't think like that. They just play with what's on the stack. But you already know what they can do or can't do.
Yeah, and so I'm offering them the best advice because I know that whatever move that they make, the next series of moves I'm going to make after that, is always going to put me ahead. And so it doesn't matter if they know if they receive the best advice. I think like that's a level of politicking that I don't think other players necessarily understand because again, most of the times people are like, "Oh, you don't have my best interest at heart, or you're not going to give me the best advice." It's like, no, I will give you the best advice because the problem is that by the time I'm giving you the best advice, I have already made the best move in the game, and you just didn't realize it. It has now put you in this position where I can give you the best advice, knowing confidently well that after this move, whatever move you take, I will always be in the better position, right?
Yeah, but I mean, what you're talking about is just strategy, not politics, right? Like that's just making strategic plays to force your opponent's options to be a lot worse than they are, or at least not adversarial outcomes for you. So I mean, it's certainly related, but I think to some extent, kind of politics when it is specifically strategy and involves no discussion and precedes a given event by a lot doesn't no longer resembles, I think, what people might intuitively think of as politics in a CDH game.
Yes, and that's the thing is that like I personally find it that like when people say that you're a great politicker, I'm kind of like to Tyler's point. It's like no, I'm like it was really hard for me to believe that I'm really good at politicking when to me it's like that's just decision making right there. But I think that like oftentimes people see the politicking as the end result, like oh Charles can give the best advice to someone and he always like plays out on top of that and like or like that's why Charles is like politicking because he always seems to give you the best advice and it's not actually the best advice and it's like no, that was the best advice. It's just that you just by the time I was giving you that advice, you were already in a losing
With
position.
known information. Right. You don't know what's in their
With no
hand.
information.
And they don't know what's in your
I don't know what's in their hand. I have some guesses, and I also have like contingencies to that, like either with cards in my hand or with game actions that I can take, and I can feel confident about like my chances given what I tell them based on like probability and likelihood, right? There are situations where they can come out on top based off of the top card that they draw out of their deck, but again, like I'm not like that's out of anyone's control. I think that like the way like when people look at that, I think the problem is that they're looking at politicking as that without seeing any of the strategy or game actions or anything before that. Like one of the things that annoys me as a player is when someone tries to win their whole entire game of Commander just by sweet talking everyone in the
Right.
table.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm just like, bro,
Yeah.
like,
You notice,
stop.
like after a round, like somebody like me or Tyler, the game's over and like someone goes, whew. It's like you have no idea what was in my head the whole time. The stress I had in here that I couldn't show. I've been thinking about a million different scenarios, and everyone's just like, "How's your mom? How you doing?" You know, during mulligans, and I'm over here. What if he has this? What if I have that? What am I looking for? So the whole game, I'm so stressed. So the second somebody wins, I'm like, "Hey God, I need a cigarette. And I don't even smoke." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I want to get. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that, Tyler. So what kind of piggyback what he was talking about, hidden and known information, right? So the difference of, hey, I'm going to give you this advice because this is what I see, this is how the table is, da 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 da. Or, hey, this is all known information. He just ad-nosed, right? So what's kind of the difference of showing hands, not showing hands? When's the right time to do that? When's the right time not to do that?
Yeah. Well, I maybe we should have done this before, but I think it's worth making a distinction between like tournament play and when you're just like jamming a game of Cedh for
You're
fun.
right.
Because I think, leaning really hard into like aggressive politics, like using your information like your hand and throwing that around and trying to pressure people about it. I would say that's kind of reserved for
I,
when there are
yeah, I
stakes.
probably wouldn't
Like
do that with my
if it's going to make the
friends.
game less fun, just
Yeah, yeah.
don't necessarily do that when you're just jamming CDs for fun.
I
But
agree.
um, yeah, I think with with the hand, like the goal a lot of times is if your opponents are trying to evaluate who's the arch enemy, because as we all know, there's very often kind of not necessarily one exclusive arch enemy,
Yeah,
but one person who seems to be winning in CEDH.
right.
And a lot of times, you want to reveal hidden information in order to manage your opponent's perception of your threat level. Because one of the best ways that you can, not lose the game, not have all your stuff countered or something like that, is to make sure that your opponents don't think that you are the biggest problem at the table.
Yeah.
So if the hidden information that they're worried about that you have in your hand is part of what is causing them to assess that you might be a much bigger threat than you actually are, reveal it. Take that uncertainty away and show them that your opponents should potentially be a lot bigger of a threat than they appear to
Yeah.
be, especially if they're not willing to also reveal their hands. That's something you can immediately
I
say.
always say it's a 1v3, the person running away with the game or the person winning. It's a 1v3. Hey guys, I know we're enemies, but right now he's winning. So we need to band together. This is what's going on, right? It's
Hmm.
definitely, I always thought that. It's a 1v3 for sure.
Yeah, I think most of the time it is, and it's not always. There are some times that two players are running away with the game and two are left in the dust. Like it does happen in
Yeah.
other ways,
Yeah.
but yeah, absolutely. You can be revealing information to try and mitigate how much you appear to be the threat, and I think people should do that more than they do in general.
So yeah, let's talk about it. The sixth thing we have written down, the MSPG, the multiplayer procedure. What's kind of Charles? What's the best way to go about that? Is kind of this is my hand or this is your hand. That guy's trying to win. What do you think, like tournament wise? What's the best way to kind of
In terms of like best tournament policy, or like how do you like?
yeah, like the line of being a dick and not being a dick of aggressive politics and not aggressive politics because like okay, Charles talks a lot, but you should listen to him. He knows what he's talking about compared to that guy that has Thorkel in his hand, right? And he's just yapping the whole time, but he's not really saying much. So kind of talking about the procedure guide of, hey, I'm not being aggressive, I'm trying to let you guys know Tyler's winning, don't listen to him without being a dick, you know what I mean?
Man, I feel like I'm so. I think it's funny is because I feel like I'm so not hungry for a win these days that like I
Oh,
would tell
come
someone.
on.
No. I would tell someone like, hey, you shouldn't like do this, and the guy with the Thoracle is yapping away,
And you see it a mile
and
away. Yeah.
I see it a
Oh, I
mile away,
smell
and
it.
I'm just
Yeah.
like, yeah, and I'm just like, I could continue to have this argument with you for the next 10 minutes, but I'm
Yeah.
not. And so if you, the player that this guy is trying to convince that he doesn't have the win, don't see that, whatever. We lose the game. It's
And
fine.
I'm on the opposite. I've been playing a
Yeah.
lot of competitive Magic lately, and I'm on the ball. I can smell shit a mile away. I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know if we should just. Tyler hasn't said anything for 10 minutes.
I've been in a tournament before where someone literally tried to convince that them drawing 14 cards from the One Ring is not going to have them win the game. And
I'm not winning.
and-
Let the Grand Abolisher resolve. I don't know, man.
I mean, I was going to kill them with an Orcish Bowmasters, but it required that another player activate the One Ring, and it was that player's turn. And then the guy was arguing, it's like, oh, well, if you kill me, then who's going to stop Charles? Because Charles is going to win on his turn. And the thing is, I didn't say anything because he was right. I was going to win on my turn.
Yeah.
But my point here is, if you are going to, if you can't decide between two players and one of them is saying that this guy's going to win without me, then just win on your turn, right? Just go for the win because it's clear that, you're not going to get another turn after this, And I wish I gave that player that advice. I wish I had just told the player, activate your One Ring now. Not because, you're helping me to kill this guy,
Right.
but because you need to win right now. Right?
Right.
Because this guy is not going to give you your next turn.
And it's totally
right?
different.
And I'm not going to give you the next turn.
And it kind of matters the priority, right? If you're last, if that guy gets a turn before you, it is what it is. But if you're next in turn order, right? I think that changes everything.
I just think that, actually, this is a really good politics advice. If two players are trying to convince you that the other one is the enemy, they're both your enemies.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
It's a 1v3 sometimes.
Yeah, I mean,
3v1, yeah.
they're both your enemies, and then here's the other thing: evaluate your resources now, right? Do you have enough resources to stop one of those players? Do you have
Right.
enough resources to stop the other player? Do you have enough resources to stop both players?
Right.
And if it looks like that you do not have enough resources to stop both players, especially if you're like a Tidna Krom or you're some type of blue combo player like Tidna Malcolm or something like that. The nice part about, because I usually don't play combo decks, but my point about, and this is something that I will concede about combo decks, the nice part about combo decks is that you could just win, right? Instead of using that Ranger Captain Eos to negotiate with the table, I can stop him on his turn, and then I have these cards to stop her on their turn. It's not going to be enough, especially if they have so many cards in hand, and you know that I can't stop everyone, and I can't trust everyone anymore. Then take those cards, and instead of playing them defensively, play them offensively. Go for the win now, right? Because there isn't going to be a turn after your turn.
Can I try to generalize what you're saying in a way that I think might be helpful?
Yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
If you talk yourself into playing police because you think you're about to lose to one or more of your opponents, you will almost always still lose if you are able to police one and not the other. And
100%.
that is why you just have to you can't be police unless either your deck is specifically for that, like Nimrus, for example, where you're explicitly trying to control the entire game. But just as you said, unless you have the resources to police the entire table, don't volunteer to police part of the table, because savvy players will see that and they have a much better idea of when their window is to win.
Yeah.
They will leverage it. They will try to get you to spend your policing resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a really good politicking safeguard, basically, for anyone listening to this. If someone's trying to politic you through game actions or through words, right? Think about that for a moment. Think about your resources and think about, what do I have to say here, right? If I spend my resources to stop this person because it's the right game action, but then I lose to this person, then I need to rethink about how I'm using my resources, right?
Yeah.
Instead of using that Ranger Captain Eos to protect something, right, or to stop someone from winning, I need to protect my win line now.
Yeah.
And that's and that's also goes into the whole deck building philosophy. If you have cards that are only really good at stopping someone from winning, but you can't use them to pivot to winning yourself, to protecting your win line, right? Then that card is more one-dimensional. It's less flexible. It gives you less political leverage to pivot what you're going to do in that whole diplomatic situation, right? If you have like this counter spell, but you get like for example, um, what's the one that like you can only that you can cast for like force of negation, right? You can only cast it for free on your opponent's turn,
Right.
right? Unless if you're able to win on your opponent's turn, it kind of sucks because you won't be able to use it really well to protect your
Yeah, I
win
hate
on
that
your
card.
turn. Yeah, and that's and again like that affects your political ability, right?
Yeah.
Because you have this force of negation, and you're like, hey, I have this interaction, and it's really good for me to interact on my opponent's turn. So now I have leverage on the table to talk to people of like, hey, I can stop you from winning. But in a situation where you are forced to king make in a game, don't try to king make, just win yourself, you know. But you can't. But now your the decision making calculus that you have about can I win this turn is affected by the fact that you have a force of negation in hand, and you wish that it was a pact of negation instead or something that you
Right.
could cast for free,
For offensive.
right?
Yeah.
And again, like that deck building philosophy has affected your political situation, right? Without you realizing it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I want to talk about that a little bit of policing. Like, I played some Thrasios decks, so right now Thrasios is like the hot thing. Thrasios Temno, yada, yada, yada. Let's talk about it since Tyler's here. I feel like a big card in those control decks are, say, Seaborn Muse. Like, someone casts a Seaborn Muse, everyone goes red alert, right? And Kennen casts Seaborn Muse, oh my god, we're gonna lose. But sometimes, like say in a Thrasios Bruce deck or a Thrasios whatever deck, it's like, hey guys, I'm not winning with my Seaborn right now. Let me police the table and then deal with Seaborn later. If you let him untap 4 or 5 times with Seaborn Muse, yeah, you're probably dead. But if you let him untap 2 or 3 times, he's policing and then go from there. But it's really hard because Seaborn Muse are like a consecrated Sphinx. Cards like that are so strong. You see them hit the table and it's like, oh my god, Swords of Plowshares. It's like, yeah, man, but let me police the table a little bit. And it's really hard, especially with new players, like I said before, threat assessment. Like, hey, I get Seaborn Muse is the problem, but right now I will show you my hand. I'm not winning. Yeah, if you give me 5 Kitten activations, who's not winning, right? But give me 1 or 2 to stop them, or Thrasios activations, give me 1 or 2 to stop them, and then go from there. And I totally agree with the deck building because it's like mono white Kennen, a random white black deck that doesn't even know why they're at this table, and then I'm playing this Thrasios Timna strategy where I'm like, you know what, you're probably right, but with Kennen I can't let him untap with a Seaborn Muse. I'm gonna hold the Swords of Plowshare and kind of talk about it. But I just feel like every time we see Seaborn Muse, someone goes to destroy it, and I'm like, whoa, well, don't listen to him, he has a Seaborn Muse on the stack. I get that, but calm your tits a little bit, buddy.
Yeah, sometimes it's the right decision to let Seedborn resolve if other players at the table, presumably the ones that have removal or have an answer for it,
Yeah.
specifically need the help to keep another player in check. Yeah, it can be right to let it resolve.
Yeah.
If I'm the player casting that Seedborn Muse, I'm hopefully gonna make sure to put myself in a position where I can articulate why and show other players at the table. So, for example, I've done this before. If there's one player who has a hugely problematic board state, I will, if I have 7 or more mana up, I will tap down to play a Seedborn Muse, and only then, after it is already on the stack, say, I would love to help you guys deal with this Cyclonic Rift that is in my hand. I'll overload it, but I will have to untap with the Seedborn
I
Muse now that
got
I've
you.
put the mana to put it on the stack.
But you say that after
Um,
you put Seaborn on the stack.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not going to volunteer
I like
to
that.
cast the Cyclonic Rift and not cast the Seedborn Muse.
Gotcha.
But yeah, the problem with Seedborn Muse decks and that kind of thing, all the decks that are trying to win through incremental advantage or activations, be it Thrasios activations or Kinnan activations, like, in a sense, that is their Adnos, but it's a very slow incremental win. Like, that's specifically how it goes. So, people freak out about it and think they need to deal with it right away, and it is often easiest to deal with it right away because it will just start accruing advantage almost immediately.
100%.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be dealt with right away. It's just that most decks run a lot more tools to deal with things on the stack than things on the
That
battlefield.
reminds me of kind of the Chain of Vapor thing. It's a hey, he wins here. I'm gonna chain of vapor targeting your thing, and now you have to sack a land to get rid of it, which I think I saw Tyler doing on a video, and that's a perfect example
Yeah,
of
yeah.
I could easily just 1-for-1 chain of vapor boom, but we're not in a 1v1 format. No, I'm gonna chain of vapor your problem, so he doesn't untap with Nadu and win, or with whatever it was, right? So I'm gonna make you do it, and that guy's like, damn, that sucks, but you kind of put him in a corner, and
I
Kind of
mean,
still have to.
something like
that's
that.
kind of like
But
what.
Tyler didn't say that before. He goes, chain of vapor on the stack targeting this. He wasn't like, hey, I have this chain of vapor, blah 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 blah. No, he was like, chain of vapor targeting your thing. Are you gonna make us lose the game? What do you got? He's like, you're right. I got to sack a land, get rid of my thing, and then bounce this thing. And that was brilliant.
I mean, that's exactly like what I was saying about like you don't have to politic with your words. You can like cards are built in to be political vessels.
Yeah.
Like that is a situation where he doesn't have to tell his opponent like, "Hey, I have a plan. If you like follow along with this plan with me, I'll do this." It's I play a card without having negotiating with you or anything. I'm forcing a choice on you now. You know.
Yeah, I mean that's just a semantic difference, though. Like to, as we were saying before, like to me, that's if we were using the metaphor of politics, that is just the lawmaking side of it. Like this is just the doing the actual function. The politics part is about the yapping or the performance or the theatrics of it. To me, I don't know.
No,
It does overlap for
well,
sure.
it just sucks. Say you play like random spell table games with people, you're just trying to play Magic, and then they get salty and they go, "Oh, I just scoop," or "I'll just sack a land and target your thing again. Now it's back on you to do it." And you're just like, "Why would you do that? That's just you're just salty." That's just the difference of that and then tournaments, right?
Sometimes it's salty. Sometimes it is interesting, like that they do that. Like it's essentially similar to like this whole bullying aspect of like, hey, you're trying to get me to pass this buck, but I think that if I pass it back to you, right, you will have to sacrifice something because you were expecting me to do it. But I'm willing to sacrifice a resource to force you to do it, and you lose another resource on your side, right?
Yeah, this works with that chain of vapor thing too. I've done that exact kind of play and had someone just turn it back around and send the chain of vapor back at me to make it my problem again.
Yeah.
And you don't kick off that kind of thing unless you're prepared to accept that risk. But
Yeah.
Most people don't think like that,
Yeah.
and they usually just play along to
Right.
to the stratagem that you have. But it is something to keep in mind. And again, that goes back to like kind of like what I mentioned about alpha beta pruning of like, well, what if my opponent does shoot it back because they're petty, right? And
Yeah.
but their pettiness is actually like a 4D chess move, and it's actually like, oh yeah, that's a really, really brilliant play because I do have to sacrifice it, right? Like they played the reverse Uno card. Sometimes a person can make a decision for the wrong reasons and still like a really good decision, right? And that's also like the thing with politics. Like someone could be taking a game action for all the wrong political reasons, but still the correct game action. And that's why you as a player need to keep that in mind. I realize I haven't answered your question, Josh, about like hidden information and all that stuff. But real quick, an advice that I also want to give is like when you're playtesting, I know that you mentioned about like you and your brother where you have like put a prize like a collector's booster on the line and you get people to like play more. One of the things that I also have talked about like on the Mind Sculptors like way back when with playtesting decks, I did this when I was playing Owl, was giving people like putting like different roles, like player roles in a hat and then drawing from it like some randomizer.
Oh yeah.
And it'd be like
practicing for tournaments and your friends help you with your tournaments.
Yeah, and your friends are helping with you, and your friends play pattern changes based on what role they pick up. Like, hey, you're the greedy player who doesn't pay for Ristic ever, right? Or hey, you're the very conservative. Yeah, you're the conservative player, and then you also pick the right decks that fit along with that role.
Yeah.
And so that way you get really good playtest results out of your deck in terms of like figuring out, well, what happens if I have a player who will never listen to any political like assuage that I have for them. Like if I tell them like, hey, yeah, and that's another great way to practice politicking in a vacuum, because oftentimes if you're playing with your friends, you already know what your friends are going to do.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so
Right.
that's not necessarily great data when you play with strangers. And so having like taking the most common player archetypes that you see at tournaments and then putting them and then writing descriptions for them and then putting them in a hat and then having other experienced tournament players draw out
That's
of it
kind of
because
cool.
everyone knows that kind of player and they're like, oh yeah, I could totally play as this type of
Yeah,
player,
yeah, for sure.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then
You're Johnny and you're
and then
Timmy. Yeah, you're the combo player that doesn't
exactly.
play politics.
Yeah, I'm the guy who's going to throw down a bajillion non-creature spells in front of a Mystic Remora because I feel like I'm losing after they play Mystic Remora or something like that, right? And you're like, that's a
Yeah.
what?
I've always
You
done
know?
that too,
And
where it's like, hey guys, I have a big tournament this weekend. Will you guys play with me tonight? But I'm the problem at all times, and you guys are always trying to stop me if I'm not the problem. Oh yeah, we could do that. It's like, okay, cool. Now I learn, hey, is this deck defensive? Is it reactive? Is it, especially if you're testing out cards? Like, hey guys, I'm trying to test these 3 cards. Can you make sure, you do this or you remove my creature or whatever you do? And then I agree with you that it's good for deck building.
yeah, so these are again other types of safeguarding that you can do to protect yourself politically in those types of environments. Is prepare yourself in terms of like, hey, you're going into a setting. You're going to deal with players who may not believe in you and what you have to say, or players who are very stubborn, or like players who are trying to bully you into doing these things, and know like what your position is in any of those given situations. One of which, as we covered, is practice with your teammates. Play with designated roles. People who are experienced tournament players already know what those types of players are, and they can easily role play into that type of situation and give you challenging problems for you to figure out. This is also a great, and then this leads into deck building. Put cards in your deck that do not make you politically compromised, right? Where you're in a situation where you're like, I need to win now, but I can't because this card was only a defensive card that I can play, and I can't turn it offensive. And then the
Can
last, yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
I was just going to say, I want to tie that to an example that I think a lot of people might understand. I think Veil of Summer is a really good example of a card like that, where the roles that it can play and the positions in which it's useful are just not good enough. Like it is only capable of being defensive and never capable of being offensive. And in some ways, like the flexibility or the roles that a card can play is what you're talking about. It limits the decisions that you have available to you, and it can put you in a position where you feel like you have to use this in the wrong situation, just because of the
Okay.
nature of the
I
card.
think the card's more offensive than it is defensive because sometimes when I untap,
Veil of Summer.
I start with Veil of Summer. It's like a silence.
Oh, when you're using it like a silence,
Yeah,
yeah, it's not quite silence,
I'm
but
on
I
a
see what you
like
mean.
no, I agree. I'm kind of off that card, but I just recently sleeved up Najila, and in
But
Najila,
if you're untapping and
people are always
using it on your turn,
no. That's what
oh, sorry.
you're good. That's what I'm saying though. I feel like Veil of Summer is better offensively. Like, hey, I'm gonna untap upkeep. I'm gonna play this Veil of Summer. Does anybody have anything? Or it's just gonna protect my Najila because I know or I'll wait for you to remove my Najila. So when I say offensively, I mean like, hey, I have a Derevi on the stack. You move my Najila. I'm gonna play this Veil of Summer, right? I feel like in defensively in a stack battle when someone else is winning, I feel like that's when it's way worse.
Yeah, I think I just flipped the definitions. To me, I equate offense. What you're saying to me sounds like proactively, right? If
Correct.
I'm gonna like untap and then cast it like a silence, like that's a very proactive
Having
move.
that as
You're saying you
backup.
must interact with this, or I'm gonna get away with it.
Right, right. On a
Um,
stack battle and someone else is winning, I feel like Veil of Summer is horrible because it's
right.
only.
So maybe
Yeah, yeah.
it's
You're
better
right. You're right. We're on the same wavelength. Yeah,
reactively, proactively. Yeah, it maybe is a better way of parsing it.
correct. Yeah. But like in a
Yeah,
deck like Najila, I feel like I need a Veil of Summer because Najila just eats removal. So I'm just like I have to have my Veil of Summer. But like in a Sultai combo deck or a Grixis deck, or not a Grixis deck, sorry, an I can't even think today. 3-color green deck, Sultai. In a Sultai deck, Veil of Summer is kind of. I'd just rather put another counterspell in, right?
Mhm.
yeah, Sultai or Abzan. I don't
Gabzan,
know if
yeah.
like
I have a
yeah,
nasty earache and I cannot think. So the last
yeah,
thing I kind of want to
but
talk about is the huge elephant in the room. Let's talk about intentional draws in tournaments when it comes to politics. I've had nasty experience at the boil. I felt like every single round I went 0-3 and 1. every single round I felt like nobody was playing for the win, everybody's playing for draws, and I drew so many cards every single game, and my Esper deck was doing so good. But every time I had a Grand Abolisher or I had a defensive Ranger Captain, like Charles was saying earlier, everyone's like, well, I don't care if you win or he wins, you have a Ranger Captain, I'm not going to listen to you, let's draw. And I'm just like, can I lead? Can we? You know what I'm saying? Like, or the last round of the tournament, it didn't matter if we drew. If we all drew, we're all out. Or if one of us wins, one of us is in. So I had a meme betrayal on the stack, and I'm just like, hey man, if you counter this, it's irrelevant. If you don't counter this meme betrayal and I win, I move on. But he's like, I don't care, I'm gonna counter it, and I'm just like, okay man, I just felt like it was like kind of negative. So I kind of want to talk about that. Like, what do you guys feel about intentionally drawing when it comes to politics in a tournament setting?
Tyler, you first.
Sure. I think it does seem to happen a lot more lately, and I think that's because a lot of players have found that, this is a way for them to turn something that might otherwise be a loss into a draw.
Yeah.
So I understand why it happens. I do think, it requires the agreement of all players to draw. So in some of the situations you're describing, players will just kind of amass enough counterspells to say, well, I could stop anyone, and I'm in a losing position otherwise, so I'm just going to look for an opportune moment to try and get the table to agree to a draw, where I, as the player with the counterspells, can say, either I'm going to let this player win, or you're all going to agree to a draw, right? And the first thing I would say there is, you don't have to agree to that draw. The players have agency, right? They can always say, no, I'm not going to agree to that. But the other thing I would say is that part of this is on tournament organizers to figure out what the structures are that incentivize and don't incentivize draws. And my buddy and I are running a tournament February 1st that I'm looking forward to, and we talked significantly about whether we were going to turn this into one where draws are worth 0 points. And I think that's something that is worth examining.
Well, that's what Japan's doing.
It makes elements of tournament math harder. It has its own disadvantages, but draws are highly incentivized in some situations right now, and the greater the degree to which players can bully each other into accepting draws, the more that's going to happen. Like, the more normalized it becomes, the more it's going to happen. So I think that it's a problem without one good solution yet. A lot of solutions being kind of checked out, but the very first one everyone can do as players is when a player says, I want us to draw, otherwise I'm going to let this player win, call their bluff. Say, okay, fine. Then let the player win. If you really mean that, do it.
I just hate the king making, right? Like, hey, I had this pack negation and I'm out of the game and I don't have 5 mana on my upkeep. Am I going to pack this and give this guy the game and I'm out of it? Or are we going to draw? And it's just like, I feel like that makes for bad play patterns. Or what my brother was talking about, we're in round 5 and I just need to draw to get in, but you guys need to win. So they're going to use that in their advantage. So they're just trying to draw the game. And I feel like you shouldn't use outside game to affect the end game. And that's, I kind of see where people get in the weeds here is, I'm just going to wait until that guy's out and then I'm just going to try to force a draw here and I'm in the top 16. And I think that's not dumb.
Wait,
but
hold
just
on.
Disgusting.
But isn't that kind of like what in your situation earlier, where you're like, hey, I have the meme bet on the stack here. If this resolves, I make it in. But any of you guys, like, regardless of if you win or if you lose, none of us are going to make it in. Isn't that still using outside?
Right. That's what I'm saying. But, like, if we all agree in the beginning of the game, hey, man, we're going to let one of us in, yada, yada. But I totally agree with that. But what I'm saying is in that was like round 4. Say round 5 is, you guys good to draw at the beginning of the game? Me and you just need to draw or lose and we're in. Those two need to play for it. So now the whole table's like, well, we're just going to wait for those two to be out and we could use our cards to get in, is what I'm saying. But no, I totally agree with you of, hey, the meme bet thing,
I think
if you want to play to the draw, that's on you. I'm just letting you know you're not getting anything out of it. But the other guys were like, well, I'm waiting for that guy to be out of the game, so I'll just draw and get the top 16. And I feel like every game you should play for the win, 100%.
So I'm now going to address the question about, like, revealing your hand and all that stuff in regards to this as well, because I do agree with Tyler that I feel like this is kind of like on the tournament organizers. I think that, like, and I'm not a tournament organizer myself, so I don't have, like, the most experience to have a say on it. But I do think, like, the way that Magic judges, like L5 judges, have made rulings before. It's based on like the philosophy of like what this game is about. When it comes to like tournaments, like I think the spirit of the tournament is we're playing to win, right? Yeah, there are prizes on the line, et cetera, but I think that the whole point of this competition is the idea that someone comes out on top, not that they draw all their way to the top. Like we're not trying to make the tournament the game. We're trying to make it a series of games.
Right.
So don't try to gamify the tournament structure itself.
Right.
And so the less you're able to gamify the tournament structure, I think the better, the player experience is going to be, and also the spirit of competitive playing. And so at a philosophical level, right, I do think we do want to disincentivize drawings. If it has to be that drawing is worth 0 points, I'm down with that. Though I do also see like the potential where like mathematically it gets really ugly, and you almost need like more rounds, than the weekend can provide, and that's tough. And so like it's a logistical problem that Commander itself brings up because it is a longer game. Even without like I gave an example, and I think like Higher tweeted about this like way back when. Even in a game without any stacks pieces, the amount of time it takes for players to pass priority with responses on the stack like eats up so much time. Like I think there's even like a play to win video actually. With Orcish Bowmasters and Rhystic Study, and how long it takes to resolve all the triggers on the stack.
It can be a really long time, and I think it's worth mentioning that that is definitely exacerbated by politics, and I feel like there is more and not less yapping and politicking, lately. And since we kind of or brushed past this, I guess I should say, but earlier when we were talking about tournament rules and how this impacts that, like the tournament rules that we're going to use for ours. There's an addendum that was written by Max and Cedh and some other folks that are kind of tied into the CDH community. And part of what it specifically says is that a player trying to influence game actions after other players wish to continue play is unsportsmanlike conduct. And what that means is that if you're a player and someone is trying to talk you into something, and you're the one with priority, and you make a decision and they continue bullying you or trying to talk you into it, and you say, I've made a decision, I want to continue play, and they keep going, that you immediately call a judge. What?
You immediately call a judge. And also in regards to like revealing hands, from what I understand, prior to us starting this, Joshua was telling me that a player can reveal a hand to one of their opponents, but they don't need to reveal their hand to the whole table. I think that's kind of weird. I feel like philosophically, you should just reveal your hand to the whole table, right? Because then, like, it just feels like collusion to me at that point.
That's
like,
why it wasn't a thing, but now they did it a thing because the whole Jaxian probe thing. That is your information. You can do with what you want, but the opponent, if they Jaxian probe you, they cannot because it's not of their information. Because they used to be like, these are the cards. They would write down, these are the cards that I saw, and then they would look over at their notes. And that guy's like, well, that wasn't your information to show him because I didn't show him. I had it on my notes here, right? So now that's why they changed the rule of it's my information. I could do it with what I want to. But I agree with you. I think people are like this. Oh, hey, Tyler's going for it. Charles, this is what I have. And Tyler's just like, what the fuck, man? Like, how do I not know they're not best friends and they're trying to win? You know what I'm saying?
So Tyler, I'll let you speak first.
This is a lot like the intentional draws in the middle of the game, where like the obvious thing to say is, a lot of people don't like that outcome. And what we would love to do is just say, hey, you can agree to intentional draw at the beginning of the game, or it could be a draw when you hit time and no one wins the game. But any draws in the middle are not going to be okay. The problem is, from a practical perspective, you cannot enforce that in a tournament. If everyone decides they're going to agree to a draw, they can just say, that we draw and do it at the end or whatever. They're going to find a way around it. And very similarly, I think it is really difficult to enforce you cannot reveal information to only some players, because what is accidental hand bleeding and what is not accidental hand bleeding in a strategic, right? There's a certain amount of like, you just have to trust players to operate in good faith, but there's also a certain amount of being practical about making the rules in a way that it's not tempting to try and circumvent them is also useful.
There's
a slippery slope.
So when I was like 15 years old, so I don't know, like 20 years ago,
back in my day,
Yeah, Mirrodin came out, and there was a card called, I think, Mirror Mind Servant, and it was like a 2 or 3 mana mirror, and it had tap, shuffle your library.
Mm-hmm.
That was all it did, right? And I remember playing a game, and this is like my first year into Magic, and I played against an opponent who literally just picked up his deck and started shuffling it. And I was like, you can't do that. And he's like, it's mathematically still random. I didn't use Brainstorm or Sensei's Top. Like, I don't know what the top cards of my library are. Can't I just shuffle? And no, you can't. And I felt like there was some shady shit going on right there. But the reason why I want to bring this up is that the idea of just picking up your library and shuffling it, even though you don't have any knowledge of any of the cards in your library, and still choosing to shuffle it and claiming that's still like random,
That's weird.
is it, well, like the reason, like the thing is, like there's literally a game action printed on a card that lets you do that. So you're literally doing
You're
something
taking the game action.
that
Yeah.
yeah, you're literally doing something that a card that you would need a card for you to do. You know, it's the same thing with Sundial the Infinite. Like when that card got printed, which is just pay 1 tap, end the turn, activate this only during your turn. People were like, well, can't I just end the turn normally? And it's like, no. Actually, if you want to end your turn, you actually have to go through all the
Phases.
steps and phases. Whereas Sundial
Right.
immediately ends your turn. That is a very different thing.
Exile spells off
And
the
so
stack.
what?
Yep.
So this is true, but also telepathy is a card, and yet you can just reveal your hand.
So,
Right.
so yeah,
Right.
yeah. And what I'm getting at with Gitaxian Probe is that there's a difference between look and reveal, and I feel like somewhere along the line, this judge ruling seems to conflate like multiple different philosophical ideas. When you play Gitaxian Probe, you are looking at a player's hand. It does not say that you get to reveal that player's hand, which is why you can't reveal that information to other players. You can write it down and tell other players what's in their hand, but like you said,
You could be lying.
like
Yeah.
you could be lying. The thing is that it is up to that player's agency that they can just choose to reveal their hand to the table. But I just don't think that they get to have the ability to reveal their hand to one player. Like that almost seems like it would be the effect of a card that just says, target player gets to look at your hand, rather than, because that's like literally the operative word is reveal. And there is no situation where there's an effect that says reveal your hand
Yeah.
that doesn't preclude any other player on the
Right,
table.
right,
And that's why I think that's so weird to me.
But it's just going
is
down the
because-
weeds, right? Because that rule is I can reveal what I want to reveal. So now the rule has to be I can reveal to the whole table, but not just one person in a week. Because Commander goes off the multiplayer rules. I did a podcast with a judge. So what else in Magic is multiplayer? Two-headed giant. That's the rules that we got pretty much are two-headed giant rules. There isn't an actual Commander rule set yet, which hopefully they're working on it, and all that's probably going to change. But again, that's just the TO went off these rule sets. Like you said, Tyler and his whatever he wants to do, he can be like, hey, no, I'm going to use this rule set, and it could be totally different. I just feel like CDH in particular, we're still working things out because it's not even a format. We're just a bunch of casual players thinking we're good at Magic, right?
I'm just saying, like, if any judge is watching this, like, from a rules philosophy standpoint, right? Like, that's just like if you're showing your hand to only one player, that's not revealing.
Correct.
And if you're specifically using the word you can reveal your hand to players, like from the way that it's been printed on any Magic card, reveal has always been to the whole table.
But that's what I was saying earlier. I think that's a huge problem, and I don't like it. Is I'm just going to show you my hand and show you I'm not winning, so stop that player. I hate that. I hate the idea of I can reveal my hand at all times. I'm going to show you my hand, you show me your hand. I'm just giving you all the information to show you I'm not winning or I am winning, yada, yada, yada. I just feel like it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. I feel like you shouldn't be able to do that. But then you're telling players, hey, you can't reveal your hand. Okay, well, now you're telling me what I can and can't do, and then, you know what I'm saying, it's not making a game action. It's like Glarb, right? You can look at the top card of your library. You can do that at any time. So as you're resolving ad-nos, you can do that in between resolving ad-nos. Not a lot of mechanics in Magic can do that, right? You have to resolve the spell and then yada, 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 right?
Yeah. Charles, just for the record, too, the way the MTRA is written, it actually doesn't ever use the word reveal.
Okay.
But that's that's kind of semantics. I'm not sure that it's actually important because it is counterintuitive, I think, to Magic players that things that are normally revealed or revealed to the whole table or have been played that way in casual Commander for a long time seem to behave differently in a tournament. But
Yeah, and again, it
Yeah,
all
yeah.
boils down to what Tyler was saying earlier. It's totally different if we're all just playing. If you guys are like, "Hey, man, Josh, I want to play with you." Okay, cool, let's play. We're not doing that. We're not doing all the crazy revealist. We don't. I don't care. Tyler, win the game, please. It's a privilege to lose to Kennen, right? But in a tournament, when there's money on the line, I don't care if your grandma died yesterday. I'm here to win, and that's a whole nother ball game. And I'll do anything it takes to win. If legally, right? I'm not going to show you my nipples. You know what I mean? You can't be like, I'll give you $5 if you let me win this game, right? Obviously. But that's me and my brothers were arguing the whole reveal hand. He's like, "Oh, I'll never reveal my hand. I don't believe in that." It's like, I'll reveal my hand if there's $5,000 on the fucking line. You know what I mean? And that's what that guy did, and that's what he won. They stopped Kennen. The next turn around, he won with Thorkel in his hand, and there's nothing NATO could do. And he's like, "Sorry, guys. He didn't king make. Hey, we made a deal. I went up to my deal. The next turn went around, and I won the game, right?" So, was there anything else you guys wanted to talk about? And I did want to ask Tyler, where's your event at? Is it online?
It is right here in my backyard, basically, which is in Bethlehem, PA. So
Oh,
we're about an hour and a half north of Philly, about an hour and a half southwest of New York City.
cool.
Um, and we're running at just like a little fire hall. It is not game store affiliated
Okay.
or any of that, but we are super looking forward to it. It's a cool, funky little space, and I think Charles is going to be there too.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
be there.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. If you
Oh,
have
I'm
a
so
flyer or
excited.
anything, send it to me. I'll post it and everything.
Sure,
That's
yeah.
so cool.
Convoke.gg is our site. I'll drop it in the chat
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah. Let me know, and I'll whatever I can do. That's awesome. I'm in Florida.
Maybe I should drop it actually.
There's no way I could make it, but dude, that's sick.
Yeah.
That is so
I
All
sick.
think
good. There may be more. We're working
Yeah,
on it.
cool.
I think
Um,
we jump. Oh yeah, sorry. I'll let you finish.
no, no,
Yeah,
go
we're
ahead.
good.
Go ahead,
No,
Charles.
I was just gonna wrap up and say like I think we jumped around several topics, but
Yeah,
I
it's
think
fine.
that for yeah no it's totally fine. And I think but I think this was like a really good conversation. I think that there are a couple other things to follow up, but I feel like that could be done in later episodes and whatnot. I already talked to you, Josh, about like some potential people that you could bring on.
Yeah,
I think that like the intentional drawing conversation, there's a lot more to it in terms of like the dynamics about it, because I highlighted to him that like the idea of using outside game information to affect your in-game decision making uh, does exist in 1v1 games. Like the idea of like, for example, tiebreakers, like, hey, uh, I've seen the tiebreaker postings. I'm like 90% certain that if I like draw this game, right? The opponent that I don't want to play at in the top eight won't be there, for example,
right.
right?
Yeah, that's
And that's
mucky.
where
Ugh.
yeah, and that happens.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it, like where you might be playing this game, and you're like, man, I really hope that any of the opponents I played previously don't try to draw their game, because that's going to screw over my tiebreakers. You know, and someone else is like, oh, I'm guaranteed in the top eight, and that guy is dependent on me now. And
Well, and also in
yeah,
1v1, you know what deck he's playing. You're watching him play it during rounds. You know how to beat his deck. You know he's a bad matchup for you. In Commander, you don't really have that. Oh, that guy's on blue farm, right? Or, oh,
yeah.
Comedian's over there. He's a good player. I hope I don't play him. You don't really get that a lot. But I
It
definitely see what you're saying for sure. Like,
the the, the,
that's
the,
kind of
the
money.
tiebreaker thing yeah, the tiebreaker thing happens rarely in 1v1 because of how large the player pool is,
Right.
and how many rounds go on in like a Grand Prix
Yeah.
or something like that, or like
Right.
regional championships nowadays.
Yeah.
But the thing is that like it's not like that player behavior or mindset still isn't there, and when the opportunity presents itself, you will have players capitalize it. I think like the issue of why it's so prevalent in Commander is because of how few rounds we have, how limited the time is for like a weekend of Commander, and then also the larger player pool that we're dealing with per game, where it's not a 1v1 situation. And so you have more opportunities for that intentional draw to happen. But what I'm getting at is that this isn't something, because I see this online on like social media and all stuff. Social media is not real, but like essentially like people are like saying like, oh yeah, Commander players and these intentional draws is like, bro, it's always been there, right? Since time immemorial. It's just that Commander really highlights this
Right.
because of how
It
it's
happens
built.
every
And
tournament, a lot in all the tournaments,
yeah,
not once in a blue moon or yeah. I got
yeah,
you.
and so talking about this with 60 card players in terms of like how they feel about it and all that stuff, because I think it's really interesting that like players will feel really bad about, oh yeah, these players just drew in to like top eight. And it's like, what happens in a game when I get paired with someone and my friend is also playing, and I can choose to draw this game or win this game and make it to top eight, but but if I win this game, my friend gets to go
Well, that
into
happens to
top eight.
RCQs a lot,
And
right? Where
yeah,
four or
and it's
five
like,
people
okay,
go into a 20-person RCQ, and it's like, well, that's not fair because we've already
and
qualified
it
and you
feels like
haven't.
colluding.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
That's colluding.
yeah. I mean, but like again, like that's sort of like what I'm getting at is like you already see this happen elsewhere, and but we don't really get conversations about like it as a whole, and it always gets really focused on like Commander, and I feel like that is a conversation that.
Yeah.
I mean, like I have not played 60 card Magic competitively in like ages now, and so getting someone who's like more seasoned about this
Yeah.
to talk about that would be interesting, especially someone who has both perspectives of 60 card Magic and Commander.
Yeah.
And plays Commander.
Well, that's why I'm glad I
competitively.
did the politic because I couldn't tell you how many 60 card players or other players from other card games. Oh, I don't want to play that. There's too much politics in CEDH. It's like you don't understand. That's a bad misconception. Just because you're a good 60 card player doesn't mean you won't be a good CDH player. He's like, oh, I just want spells in the stack. I'm like, that's just not how it works, right? And that's what people don't. That's what a lot of like my friends. I probably have 4 or 5 friends that don't like CDH because of that. Because they don't have good personalities. They don't like talking. They're very quiet, but they are good Magic players. But I'm trying to let them know like it's more than just that. Yeah, you have to talk, but it's. I could tell you how many times the guy that's talking the whole time in the round ends up losing to the guy that's quiet, right? Like, I'm just gonna sit
Plenty,
back
yeah.
and draw my cards at Ristic Study while you keep yapping. And Tyler goes, Basalt Monolith, and we're like, oh, we're dead.
Yeah.
So is there anything else, Tyler?
There's one more thing, yeah, that I think I want to say, which is at least very closely politics adjacent. Um, with politics, with bullying in particular, with a lot of how you are as a player, and I would include things like how you treat your opponents, whether you choose to be truthful even though you don't have to. Um, it's worth not being myopic about it, because if you are short-sighted, you will end up playing a lot of these players again, and especially when you're thinking about kind of your casual pods, your fun games with players that you're going to see week in and week out. Don't become the kind of politicker that people dread. If you're going to
Yeah.
politic, do it in a way that is enjoyable and fun for the table, and know when to stop. Because otherwise, like these are the kind of behaviors that, if you think of it so deeply as a strategy that you're just going to politic nonstop because you're allowed to, it's going to make you an unpleasant player to play against, and that's going to make you have less fun playing
And
CDH,
and
guaranteed,
also,
even in tournaments.
I'm by the rule of I've always been a man of my word. If I tell you don't attack me, attack him, I'm not ad nauseum. I mean that. And if you've never played with me, you don't know if I'm lying or not. But if you play with me, like I go to a lot of 2 hours away. We do this monthly 40-person CDH tournament. So 3-4 tournaments in, they know I'm not gonna lie. They know I'm letting you know I don't have it. I don't have to reveal my hand. But then you have the guy that lies every time, right? The guy that I'm not on ad nauseum in my Grixis deck, and then cast ad nauseum. You only need that to happen to you once, and then now you know. Or like you said, 3 rounds later in the top 16, you see that guy across from you.
Yep.
You know in your mind, I'm not going to believe anything he says. Hey guys, this is what happened 3 rounds ago. Don't believe anything he says. And then now he's like, oh shit. Right, I kind of shit the bed on that one.
Yeah, that's the flip
Yeah,
side.
100%.
I mean,
If you know your opponent lies, tell your other opponents.
100%.
This player lies.
Yeah. Hey, he lies.
I do.
So you guys know.
or lie that your opponent lies.
Ooh.
Ouch.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
gonna
We
do that.
don't want to necessarily
Well,
go there. What I was gonna say,
I love the guys that
I mean,
resolve the
like-
silence, and they're like, "Well, I'm not winning here, guys. Let's resolve the silence. I'm gonna board wipe or whatever."
Yeah.
And they Orcish Bowmaster, Wheel of Fortune. It's like you're about to draw 7 cards. Oh, I drew the win. Sorry, guys. It's like, why don't you tell me when silence is on the stack that you're gonna cast Wheel of Fortune? But no, obviously they're not gonna say that. And they're like, well, I didn't know I was drawing this or that or under a breach. Well, you said you're not lying with silence on the stack, or you're not winning and now you're winning. It's kind of a weird thing to.
well,
you know.
Yeah, because it's like legal speak. It's like, yeah, I'm not winning because I don't know that I'm going to win, but I'm
But they
going
don't
to
say
make a
that though.
play. But yeah, but I'm going to make a play that will have a likely chance that I will win,
Yeah.
or I'm going to make a play that's going to hopefully I will win. And then like sometimes I feel like I would ask them like, well, what outcome are you hoping for,
Yeah.
right? When you play that silence, and if you're telling me that like, oh well, I'm hoping to do X Y Z, and it's like, and you're not hoping to win, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like,
Or you're not just going to
yeah,
cast a spell and pass. What he did was silence, meme betrayal, Orcish Bowmaster, rocks, 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 Wheel of Fortune. And it's like,
yeah,
you didn't say you're doing any of that. I just thought you were going to, board wipe, right?
yeah.
But it's like, he didn't
I
Yeah,
lie,
yeah,
right?
but it's also on you to ask, right?
yeah.
There's a
So
certain amount of lawyering that you just got to decide what your comfort level is.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah, yeah,
mean?
yeah. I agree.
as someone who has like a philosophy degree and also does a lot of like just in my degree, I did do a lot of lawyering on like philosophical texts. I hate lawyering.
Me too.
I really hate players who try to lawyer, even though like I'm pretty good at like reading between the lines. I'm like, bro, this is not the type of game I want to play because you could do this to me, but you can't do it to like Steven over here. And because now Steven's in the position of king making, right?
Right.
Because you
You
and
put
I
him in
are
that position.
are
Yeah.
yeah, because you and I are in lawyer speak, and you're not going to like it if Steven chooses to be on my side and not yours, just because Steven doesn't understand what
Or
the hell you're
Steven's a new
talking about.
player, and he has no idea what's
Yeah,
going on. He doesn't
exactly.
know
Like
Sisei just
I'm
untaps
like,
and wins here.
I'm like, and so going to like Tyler's point, like the type of player that you want to be, like you don't want to be hyper fixated on politicking as your like main kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
going back to like what I'm saying, like about like the kind of player who wants to sweet talk their way into winning the game, and I'm like, dude, actually just play the game. Like philosophically, right? The game is still Magic, right? There is a social component to it, but just because there's a social component to it doesn't mean that you forgo all of the strategic component at all. Like it is personally for me like my own personal philosophy. It is like I would say it's like 80 to 90% strategy, and then I mean with some combination of luck somewhere in that percentage.
Yeah.
But then like the remaining like 10 to 15% is politicking. It's that social aspect of it. But don't rely so heavily on it because then you're not really playing with the cards. You're playing with your mouth.
Right, and that's what I don't like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so yeah. I mean that's sort of like my sounding off point
I
there.
agree.
Oh yeah, one last thing. The whole rolls in a hat thing that I mentioned, Tyler, you just brought that to my attention. If you the thing is like if you do that and you do your playtesting with your deck that you're playtesting for a tournament, right? That's the other thing. So sometimes your deck, you find out, hey, this deck works really well against these other decks. Regardless of what they try to politic or do, whatever decisions they make, I just stomp on these decks. Great. However, these decks, I have to be very careful about what my opponent is doing, right? And depending on their political situation, they could end up king making the game because of that or whatever. And some of those playtesting situations that I found, I mean, and this actually happened with like the first Punt City where I play with Al, because like Mike Sad was like, yeah, I'm killing Charles because Charles has board wipes in his deck or something like that, and like once I'm eliminated, I can't like talk to any of the other players at the table or give them decisions for like the best
Right.
plays and all that stuff. And the thing is that if you're the type of politicking player where you are such a griefer politically to other players that they don't want to hear you talk, I hate to break it to you, but some players might make the executive decision. This player is worth more getting eliminated early in the game than anything else. And you don't want to build your reputation in that situation where people are targeting you because of how you politic. Regardless of if you're a liar or anything like that, but if you are just insufferable in the fact that you bully other players or like such and so, like players are like, I don't want to have to contend with someone who's taking too long on their turns or someone who has to debate every game action I'm taking and draws out the game. I'd rather that player just be eliminated out of the game, you know? And that's something
So
to,
that's
to be
true.
mindful about.
But also, just call judges on people if you say, I would like to continue game actions, and they keep
Oh
talking.
yeah, no, no, yeah. I'm not talking about like someone who's just prolonging the game, but someone who is
Yeah.
like, this person is criticizing every game action that I'm taking, and I just don't want that. Like, remember, you might think that you're being rational or whatever, but that doesn't mean that your players have to be rational either. And they can
Right.
make, and just because, and again, going back to what I was saying earlier, just because someone can make a petty decision doesn't mean that it's like they can have all the wrong reasons for making that decision. That doesn't mean that that decision isn't the best decision
Right.
either.
What I love is
Yeah.
like I had a Phyrexia Metamorph in my hand at the boil, and Kennen had a Hullbreaker out, and they probably went on their next turn. Well, in that deck didn't have any infinite mana outlets. Well, I had the special sailor, the one where 3 and a blue draw a card. So it was funny, I try to get rid of the Oppo or something, and they're like, well, why would you get rid of it? And they're for 5 minutes they're delegating on why I'm doing something, and they're like, that's just a bad play. Why would you do that? And I'm just like, yada yada yada. Okay, whatever. So then Oppo's gone, and then I go Phyrexia Metamorph, copying Hullbreaker, and they're like, oh, that makes sense. But I couldn't say why I'm doing that.
Yeah.
I'm going for the win, but I can't say that on the stack. But they were literally belittling me. Well, why would you play that if you know he has this? Or why would you get rid of the Oppo if you do this? And they're kind of talking shit, but I'm just taking it. I'm just like, yeah, you're right. Probably not a good move. Priority? You know what I mean?
Okay,
and then they saw the
yeah,
Hullbreaker, and they're like, oh, that makes sense. He's winning the game right now.
Yeah, and my other thing about that is like to the players who are like, why would you do that? Like, I just need to reemphasize this. This is a tournament where you're trying to find out, not only best deck but best player skill wise.
Correct.
Not everyone is going to think like you or play like you.
Yeah.
It is expected that someone is going to play like some big brain move that you hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
But it's also likely someone's going to make some really idiot grade level play.
Right.
And it's going to happen in your game.
Right.
You have to take account for both spectrums
In other games
of
too,
that
yeah.
thing. Yeah,
There's luck in it, but you don't accidentally win a CDH tournament.
And I think like that's why I said earlier, like I feel like I'm less hungry for the win these days, because when I see someone make a dumb decision,
just
I'm
like,
just like,
whatever.
well, it's like, well, no, that's literally part of the tournament.
Yeah.
I got paired with some players who
Yeah.
couldn't see what I was going to do, and you know what? I'm not going to argue about it, right? And then I got paired with other players who are really, really good at picking up what I'm putting down, and I'm picking up what they're putting down, and again, like I just find it really weird when people are like, "Why did you do that?" And it's like, did you have some idea of how this pod was going to play out when you enter it? Because I didn't.
Right. I mean, there's reasons why, like Tyler, top 4s, top 16s, every play to win event. Right, comedian can take any deck in top 4 with it. Right, it's because those players know the game. They put their 5,000 hours. They know what you're thinking before you do. They know how your deck does before you do. Right, like they have an idea, and no one can get in Charles's mind of why'd you play that Stacks Beast turn 2 and not turn 1 or turn 4? Because Charles knows exactly what he's doing at all times, but he can't know what you're gonna do because you might not even know what you're gonna do. Right.
Yeah, pretty much.
But I'm gonna end that there, guys.
Yeah.
It's been about an hour and a half. I think I'm gonna make this a 2 or 3 part series for sure.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah,
But,
there's a lot to talk
But
about
do
there.
you guys
Right?
want to plug anything or?
Sure. Yeah. I can normally be found on Play to Win stuff, Play to Win, mtg.com, or Play to Win on YouTube. Also, go ahead and check out convoke.gg to check out what we're doing tournament wise. We have our first one called Prototype coming up February 1st, which is sold out. But there is a high likelihood that we are trying to run another one based on the amount of interest, and
Cool.
we're excited about doing it and want to run good vibe tournaments that are inclusive and fun. So. Check it out.
That's cool, man.
Yeah. And you can find me on like Blue Sky or Twitter. I don't really check Twitter as much these days.
Okay.
I don't even really post there, but Blue Sky is the place to go. And I think it's the same handle, like Ilvaldi. And I can like give it to you.
Yeah,
Josh,
whatever
and
you
put it
guys
in the
want.
description.
No, I definitely think we should do this
but-
again later for sure if you guys are down.
Yeah, no.
This is such an
I'm
issue.
totally
We
down.
could talk for another hour easily.
Yeah, and I'll be at Tyler's tournament in February. So if you're already there or you just want to like swing by, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure like there will be some type of lobby con over there. Hopefully, Tyler.
Yeah, Tyler, you're not allowed to play in the tournament because you're running it, right?
Well, I guess I technically could, but I'm certainly not going to. I think that looks really
It
weird.
does look weird.
Yeah.
And we all know Tyler, right? you're not gonna do anything shady, but that does look weird.
It's just a bad look.
Right. But, so you're LobbyCon. You're like, hey guys, I know y'all just played 8 hours of Magic, but I'd play some Cannon.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how long that thing goes, but we'll definitely be at least jamming the day after, because there's no real day 2. This is a 1-dayer. So day 2, there's two local shops that where we're going to be running games
How
at.
big is it?
And
tournament.
the space, the venue.
No, the tournament.
We're doing 96 people.
Okay, so that's a whole tournament. That's hard to do in 1 day, though.
It's going to be a long day.
Start at 8 a.m. Don't start at noon.
No, we're not starting at noon.
I got you.
Basically 10 a.m. But
I got you. Well, like, you need to start playing at 10 a.m.
Pretty close,
I got you, but I appreciate you guys having on. That's the Mono White guy. That's Tyler. Appreciate y'all watching. Listen, subscribe, all the buttons. I'm going to put everything down below. You guys have any questions for them? I'll put their handles down. They're on Discord, whatever y'all need. We probably do a part 2 for sure. There's just, I have literally, my paper is full of different things I didn't even get to, and it's fine. But I think we hit the big thing, the big stuff I really wanted to talk about. If anyone's priority bullying, just stop. Just don't. You're not the smartest guy at the table, I promise you. Just quit being dicks to people. Call the judge, right? If we learn anything today. But all right, guys, I'm out. Peace.
All right.
We gon' always win. Promise that that's not a promise, yeah, that is a threat. You know that I promise to bring the team commas. When the whole team win, that's when you flex. Win, and I'ma do it again. Watch me win, then watch me do it again. Tell 'em I can't take no loss.